Hello and welcome to The Information, where you'll get all the information on the latest in indie, electronic, and experimental music. Today we have an album review. We're reviewing the new George Clanton record, Slide. For those unfamiliar, George Clanton is the man of many monikers. In the late 2000s, he began producing music under the name Mirror Kisses, a mixture of dark wave, synth pop, and new wave. A few years back, he also revealed that he was the brainchild behind the Vaporwave project Esprit as well. And 2015 was a big year for George Clanton. He decided to make his first record under his own name and launched the label of the same name, 100% Electronica. Now 3 years later, in 2018 here, we have another release, a sophomore record from George Clanton under his own name called Slide. And unlike his previous record, 100% Electronica, this is a huge step, in my opinion, in the sound and the production and the style of George Clanton's music. With 100% Electronica, we basically had a lot of sounds that would have sounded pretty much at home on an Esprit record, on a Mirror Kisses record. There were a lot of engaging, anthemic, but occasionally messy odes to 80s electronic music, and synthpop and chillwave in general. Instead of almost exclusively focusing on chillwave and vaporwave as the main genres he dabbles in, he brings a lot of tried and true indie rock sounds here, believe it or not, as well as some very impressive 90s influences here, and I'm also talking about like My Bloody Valentine and like 808 State to a lesser extent, as well as a bit of slow dive, you know, some shoegazy kind of stuff here, which is very impressive. I'm hearing some Third Eye Blind in places and some Seal, honest to goodness Seal, in others. The album kicks off pretty strongly with the intro Livin' Loose. It's an almost 6-minute electronic opus that intros with some very compressed synth chords and some sweaty saxophone until about the minute 30, minute 40 mark, where we get some mid-tempo 90s inspired breakbeats. I also love the inclusion of the It Takes Two style shouts that we get around that point as well. We don't really get vocals from George himself until about the 3-minute point, the halfway mark, but when we do, they're very sincere and very in your face. I love the vocal melody when he sings, "If you don't hurt me, I won't hurt you back," sung over top of some squelchy, distorted synth bass here. And the track that follows it, Make It Forever, is a total banger. It plays off the quiet, loud, quiet dynamic, giving choruses that much more power and impact and emphasis. The instrumental bed is this very nice, warm Esprit-style synth pad, and some more mid-tempo breakbeats come in and provide a nice backbone in addition to some sparkling, high-pitched synth arpeggios. Much like Mr. Fantano, my favorite moment in the song are the vocals that lead up to the chorus, that passionate shout of, "We can convene and make it forever." The sheer raw energy that is captured in these vocals, especially the screams that come right after that moment in the latter half of the song, are nothing less than incredible. And the drop that happens right before the last chorus, that just like 2-note guitar strum, the dun-dun, that will get anybody pumping their fist and screaming right alongside Clanton. I'm really looking forward to seeing this song played out live. Hopefully he comes to my hometown and I can sing along with it and pump my fist with him. Because one of the other enjoyable things about George Clanton's music is that you need to see him live. His live setup is incredible. He gives, no pun intended, 110% every time. And speaking of giving it his all, the next song on here, Tie Me Down, is the first to feature what I assume are live drums. We switch pretty drastically here to the previous two tracks, the very electronic sound, to a very organic sound here. We get a lot of shredding guitar and a rumbling bass line as well. I like the synth lead that comes in around the minute 5 mark. Texturally it's very nice, and melodically it fits in well with the song, but I feel like it's mixed a little bit too loudly, and also the guitar feedback later on in the track does kind of hurt the ears, especially if you're listening in headphones. I do like the chords that come in around the 2-minute mark though. They sound great, they're very soft and very lush. The song production-wise overall is a little bit rough around the edges, but perhaps that was an intentional choice by Clanton. And we get more 90s alt-rock with the more shoegazy-inspired Dumb. This was the track in particular that brought My Bloody Valentine into my head. There's a traditionally shoegazy guitar chord structure and some more presumably live drumming here. Similarly to Tie Me Down, there is a moment where the guitar melody drops out and we're kind of just left with bass, drums, and just a hint of guitar feedback. I don't know if it's the feedback or it's the like spatial dimensions of the track listening to it in headphones, or maybe it's a combination of things, but again, that moment kind of caused me a little bit of a headache to listen to at a higher volume especially. However, I do love the chorus, how it blasts in with some screaming synths later on in the track and some added walls of guitar noise. The next track, Blast Off, is essentially an extended outro of Dumb. There are a lot of the same arpeggios here that continue into the song, as well as a sweeping synth chord over top of some sour strings. I would say, if anything, it's a little bit ironic, hopefully intentionally, that the song is called Blast Off, as it does kind of slow the record down a little bit. It does even keep lowering the tempo as it fades out until about the 2-minute mark, and strangely there's like 10 seconds of silence before we get the next track. I'm not really sure why that 10 seconds of silence wasn't trimmed out. Maybe he just wanted to kind of have that be a palate cleanser, because the next track, Slide, is definitely the centerpiece of the record. This song is a 6.5-minute synth opus. There are some crushing sounds of what are presumably machinery in the background that provide percussion around some bouncing rubbery synths and some very airy, again, Seal-esque vocals here. The introduction of the break beat around the minute mark where George Clanton sings "Here Again Forever" is a very cool moment, as is the transition at a minute 48 with the break beat, some vinyl crackle, and a very moody chord progression, as well as the analog synth bass that comes in. There is just a sublime atmosphere and execution here. I also do like the running element of George using the word slide to kind of denote a transition from section to section here. And perhaps the greatest strength of this song is also its biggest weakness, in that it never can really sit still for too long and like sit in one moment. It does give the listener a chance to hear an impressive myriad of musical passages, especially the transition at the 3.5-minute mark where everything drops out and you're just treated to this isolated synth pad. It's a very cool ambient synthscape, and if anything, the one transition that doesn't really work as well for me is the one towards the end of the song, around 4.5 minutes. You get another break beat, but it's a much higher tempo and kind of throws off the timing and melody of the track in general. And I felt the vocals that came into this section, the sleep, sleep, stay the night, they were mixed a little bit lower in this section for my liking, although the vocal layering, as it keeps adding on, is quite impressive. The song Monster is probably the most traditionally pop song on the record. It's a very aquatic, sunny synth lead in here, and there's some airy, crispy drums as well. There's just the perfect amount of reverb on everything, the drums in particular, and the snare itself, if anything, kind of clips in the mix, which can either annoy you or not, depending on if you let it. The melody of the snowy, plinky lead is also another highlight on the song. The song You Lost Me There, unfortunately, did kind of lose me there a little bit. I do like that he kind of makes these callbacks lyrically to the song Make It Forever by literally just saying, "We can convene and make it forever yet again." Although with the slower tempo here, especially with the slower drums, even though again these drums are very similar to the ones on the song Make It Forever, they leave it with less impact, I think, and don't really add much or enhance Make It Forever in any way. The song Encore is basically another ambient interlude here. It serves more or less the purpose of being the intro to the final track, Walk Slowly. Do I think we needed an entire track here just to kind of set the mood? No, not really. There are some nice clanging bells that slowly fade in with some synthetic flute melodies, and all of these elements do obviously end up on the next track, Walk Slowly. But if you were to listen to Walk Slowly isolated from the intro, I feel like you would still feel like you have a complete song here. He does end up adding more percussion, and he does also bring back the shouty It Takes Two vocal snippets from the intro track, and that's in addition to the same synth pad, although this one here is pitched down and not quite as compressed this time. The song takes a pretty chill, more minimal approach until about a minute 19 when the beat properly kind of drops. I love the sound of this track once all of these elements finally come together, with the finger snaps and the 90s turntable scratches. Those are very cool effects. I love the 90s hip-hop and R&B vibe that the beat gives off. However, it doesn't last too long, as by the 2-minute 20-second mark we're already fading the song out, and it takes a while for the song to fade out weirdly. It takes about 30 seconds to fade out, and even though this is only like a 3-minute 9-second track, I feel like that's such a shame because there was more mileage to be had out of this track if he just kind of let it run. But fortunately there's still a lot to enjoy on this track, and despite the disappointing choice of the fade out, I do feel like it's a pretty solid finale to end things off. Overall, I feel like this is an improvement on all fronts from his last record, 100% Electronica. Most of the issues I have are either in the mixing or in the production choices, most of which I'm sure were intentional as they probably served an aesthetic purpose. If you can look past that or just don't mind it, you will find a lot of really great experimental synth-pop here and some honest-to-goodness indie rock dripping with some originality, some mature, if somewhat cliché songwriting, and some genuine authenticity. It's not often that you get an artist of Clanton's caliber just unabashedly enjoying and being himself. There are plenty of sonically adventurous songs and memorable vocal melodies with refreshing instrumental palettes and a cohesive overall album experience thanks to some inventive callbacks and elements from previous tracks and some seamless track flows from track to track. Unfortunately though, some of the production choices, like I mentioned, do kind of bog this record down because they are so prevalent. Ultimately though, if you like any of these bands that I had mentioned as influences for this record, or if you dig chillwave, vaporwave, electronic music, pop music, synth pop, or just good music, I would definitely give this album a listen. Production stuff aside, that would probably bring it down to probably a decent to strong 7 for me. With the mixing and production issues here though, I probably would still give it a decent to strong 7. Let me know if you guys have listened to this album, if you have a favorite or least favorite track. I appreciate you guys watching as always, and thanks again for watching The Information.